All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for taking the time to spend a little time with us this afternoon as we talk about the Senate version of the budget that is before us right now. I'm going to touch on a number of key sort of highlights, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Senator Widener, and then he and I will go through some specific parts of the budget. I think each of you may have some of the key points that we're going to address, and then we will have some time for questions afterwards. I guess the first thing that I would mention is that we have known for quite some time that this was going to be a very difficult budget. We knew that replacing the $8 billion in federal stimulus money that came into the state of Ohio, much of which went into education, was going to be difficult. We know that one of the overarching objectives that we shared with the House and with the administration, and that was balancing this budget without raising taxes. And while people were skeptical about whether we were going to be able to accomplish that or not, I think when you see the document that we're rolling out this afternoon, you'll see that, in fact, the Senate, along with the House and the governor, was able to balance the budget without raising taxes. And that was key to us because at a time when it wasn't just but a few weeks ago, we were looking at $4 a gallon gasoline. There are projections that gasoline prices are going to continue to rise. We all know the stress that the residents of the state have been under with the difficulty with the recession. This was not a time to place additional burdens on those individuals and force them to pay higher taxes. So we were very pleased that we were able to balance the budget without having to raise taxes. This has been difficult, but we think, again, it sets the stage for a structurally balanced, a responsible budget that addresses the needs of the residents of the state of Ohio and allows us to do it without raising taxes. And the cuts, while painful, we think are responsible. Again, we don't think there are any surprises here. The governor has been very clear, as have I and Speaker Batchelder, about the necessity of reining in state spending so that we do not create more problems for the future. And we have done a number of things in this budget to address those goals, and we'll get into the specifics here in just a moment. I want to turn this over now to Chairman Widener. Chairman Widener and Vice Chairman Jones have done a wonderful job of managing this budget process. Arguably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult budget that this state has faced because of the $8 billion structural deficit that we were facing. He has heard just hundreds of individuals come in and testify, spent days listening to the testimony, and all of that had an impact and is reflected in many of the changes that we have incorporated in the Senate version of House Bill 153. So with that, Senator Widener, I'll turn it over to you for some of the specifics.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as was said, obviously a very difficult time. Suffice to say, when we reviewed over 1,200 amendments that were submitted over the last several days, it certainly was a grueling time trying to determine what you can do with a minimal amount of resources. And as the President said, we've been looking at this for quite some time, well over a year, obviously, in many different instances. But obviously, we felt it was important to have our time to focus those precious resources in some key areas that were important to our members and our colleagues in our caucus in the Senate. And obviously the first one of those is education. Many of you know that the K-12 education funding has been getting a lot of conversation and a lot of scrutiny. The House implemented a provision where no more than 20% cut would be going to a K-12 school district based on their foundation formula. And we have, in our proposed version, taken that to zero. In other words, no cut in the FY11 foundation funding to K-12 school districts throughout the state. We feel that that's going to be important to basically help them bide the time through a tough budget, tough lack of resources, and frankly a forthcoming school funding formula by the governor that everyone will have an opportunity to look forward to. We've also added to that, and those districts with an excellent or an excellent with distinction ranking will receive another $17 per student, and that basically generates about another $30 million to those particular districts. We've for a long time been giving all of our local districts those categories, but this will be the first time that we've been able to put some finances and reward to those districts that are doing the performance initiatives that we've all been talking about for several years. Combined, those two initiatives are about another $115 million to K-12 schools, and as I said, we felt that was important. The next element of local government that obviously the state budget has an effect on is our local governments. And in that, we are doing two specific things. First off, we are implementing and increasing the baseline that the House started at $500,000 for local governments. We're raising that to $750,000. In other words, those governments that receive that amount or less, they'll continue to receive that amount as a hold harmless, if you will. And in addition to that, we are, over the course of the biennium, putting approximately $100 million back in the local government fund for redistribution through the formula that's current in current law. Obviously, we are also including language that both the state auditor and the House and our members have been working on, with giving more tools in the toolbox to local governments for everything from consolidation to back office sharing of services, and so on and so forth, and we feel like that'll help them better be able to mitigate and manage the overall provision of less funds. The other area that we believe is important is tax relief. We obviously have agreed with the governor and the House that we will continue to phase out the income tax that was originally scheduled for some years ago to get to the total of 21%. So Ohioans will, as most of you have memorized this number, have about another $800 million to put towards their own pocketbooks, and hopefully the middle class will be able to help ride this tide with us by having more dollars in their pockets. We also have provisions for historic preservation tax credits, job creation tax credits, and also are continuing with the House's proposal of having the elimination of the estate tax included in our version of the bill. Overall, I think it's important, and those of us that have been doing this for some time believe it's important for Ohioans to realize that the Ohio budget also contains a significant amount of property tax relief that Ohioans do not have to pay because the state government pays it. This obviously will be a historic level with this budget, with this number increasing. $1.7 billion will be paid in property tax relief, so that Ohioans do not again have to come out of their own pocket with that particular provision. In the charter school area, back to education for a moment, we are reinstated quality and operational controls, transparency. I think most of you know that our caucus position for quite some time has been for control and oversight, and we did adopt new measures to improve accountability on charter schools and community school sponsors. I'd like to thank Chairman Lehner, who is here, is also on our Finance Committee, that has worked tirelessly in this area to try to sift through all the proposals the House made and those that our members made in this. We removed the caps on community school sponsorship, but also said that the only new schools that will be started will be by sponsors that have an overall 80% of their schools performing in the top 95% of all schools based on a 3-year performance index. We've also included a prohibition on community school sponsors from selling goods and services to the schools that they sponsor. So I think for those that are interested in that area of our version of the budget, you'll see that we've continued to believe that accountability and control of expansion of these types of schools is important, as well as those parents and students having the ability to have a choice is important as well. In terms of some other education highlights, I think for those that are following this particular area of performance as an issue in our schools in Ohio. We certainly know there's some areas of concern and language in that, and we've proposed to remove a great deal of language with relation to things that may alarm persons, and though we still believe that the teacher performance, and particularly those initiatives related to Race to the Top, of which over half of our school districts are involved with here in the state of Ohio, and have had grants awarded based on those indexes, we still are trying to sift through the language and make sure there's no alarming aspects of that, and we'd be glad to answer any questions that you have in that area as well.
Chris, if I could double back on the charter schools for a minute, I think it's important to note that we maintained the provision that the House put in, and we think rightfully so, that tightened the criteria for closure of schools that were not performing well. And so we applaud the House for that effort, and we have maintained that as part of the Senate foundation of the education portion of this budget. So again, building on the work that was already started in the House. On the last issue that Senator Widener mentioned in terms of Race to the Top, we want to make it clear that we want to honor the commitment that the almost half of the school districts in the state of Ohio have already worked out with their teachers' unions, with the administration, following on the, I think, the initiative of President Obama and his education department chair, Arnie Duncan, and encouraging, a race to the top. We want the best of the best in the classroom. And so that's what we will be looking at doing, is making sure that we're continuing to build on that momentum that started in the last couple of years in terms of making sure that our children have the best students in the classroom working with them every day. So I think those are important points to mention as well. In terms of higher ed, we built on the concept of, again, introduced in the House that would reward students who come back to Ohio. And we've added a component and said if you come back to Ohio and get in-state tuition, we're going to ask you for a commitment to live here. Again, we want to keep the best and the brightest, and we recognize that at times people want to wander off for a bit and maybe explore life a bit before coming back and settling down. We want them to come back to Ohio and then become residents of the state of Ohio. And I'm also pleased to announce that the colleges and universities have stepped up and are partnering with the National Guard to make sure that we have scholarships available for the guardsmen and guardswomen that are serving us around the country or around the world. And so that again is something new where they are stepping up and making sure that scholarships are funded at the right level, and they're providing these services to those people in the military that are serving us. On the Health and Human Services side, a couple of other areas. There's been a lot of talk over recent weeks about the non-contracting language. I'm happy to report that through a cooperative effort of the hospitals, the managed care organizations, and the administration, that they've been able to work out language on non-contracting provisions that have always been somewhat of a thorny issue in previous budgets, but now that has been worked through. On children's hospitals, we are reinstating an additional $6 million a year to the children's hospitals, allowing them to draw down additional federal resources. So this maintains the commitment that the Senate in particular and the legislature in general has had with children's hospitals over the years. Been a lot of talk, and as many of you know, I've done a lot of work on the Medicaid front recently. And while not as intimately involved this time as Senator Jones and Senator Stewart were, I'm pleased that we were able to increase the level of passport funding and to build again on what the House started by putting more money into passport. We were able to do the same and increase the level of funding for passport so that we made sure that people have the option of staying at home when that option is presented to them. On the early childhood or children's side, the Help Me Grow program, we restored funding for a program that has been successful throughout the state and getting our young children prepared for school. That ultimately is going to have a benefit as we move through, as those students move through the educational system. We know from all the research that if we invest early, that pays dividends over the long run, and so we restored funding to help me grow. Kinship care also restored additional funding for relatives who become involved as caregivers with members of their family. Again, thinking in terms of the concept of giving people options and having them stay in an environment that is most comfortable for them, additional funding for kinship care. And then working with the pharmacy board, an issue that I believe the governor is actually having a ceremonial bill signing today down in my district on pill mills, and making sure we have funding for the pill mill provisions that were recently passed under Terry Johnson's leadership in the House. So a number of other issues just in terms of general government. I would note Consumers Council. We did some additional work with Consumers Council to make sure that they would have the ability to advocate for positions. There was a question about a so-called gag order. Well, we have removed that to make sure that the Consumer Council office can do its job in advocating for consumers, and restored some additional funding there. You'll find language in the bill on turnpike privatization, which simply says, if there's any action taken there, we want that to come back to the legislature. This is an important asset for the state of Ohio. We want to make sure that there is legislative input into anything that would happen. We did eliminate or abolish the Workers' Compensation Council, as we will be dealing with workers' compensation later in this calendar year and later in this General Assembly. There was really no need to keep that council functioning. It really had outlived its usefulness. You'll see a provision in there about lottery management, and that was simply to, again, create some options for the Lottery Commission. We've been pretty consistently generating $650 to $700 million a year for education, and we wanted to give them the tools to be able to determine if there was a way to increase the revenues that they could generate, and therefore help schools with some of that funding. So, in summary, I would say that this is a balanced budget. It is structurally balanced. It reduces spending. It eliminates the biggest fiscal shortfall that we've had in this state with the $8 billion that we started off with. We believe that Ohioans are paying high enough taxes as it is. We did not want to raise taxes on them and increase their burden. We've had to make some tough decisions about funding for programs that may have seen higher levels of funding in the past, but we simply did not have the money to do all of those things. So we look forward to continuing this process in the Senate. We will have the bill another week or so here in the Senate, and look forward to working with our colleagues in the House and Conference Committee along with the administration. So with that, I'll be happy to open it up for questions.